Good evening, good night, or good morning to all of you. Namaste. We are so pleased to have so many people in this meeting from all parts of the world in different time zones. I am Shakira Mohammed from Trinidad and Tobago, a teacher for the past 17 years. And ladies and gentlemen, this is the 238th edition of our ICC Thought Leaders Forum. We wish to sincerely thank all of you who have contributed in whatever way to the success of this ongoing Pan-Indo-Caribbean and Pan-Indian Diaspora Global Project. For 237 unbroken continuous weeks, we have been here every single Sunday. And in the past 4 years, 6 months, and 2 weeks, we have featured 1,076 presenters from all parts of the world speaking on 237 topics. So, ladies and gentlemen, this is a weekly forum being hosted by the Indo-Caribbean Cultural Center, a legally registered research and publishing company operating since 2010. And like today, we often partner with the Amina Ghafoor Institute for the study of indentureship and its legacies, led by Professor David Dean. Ladies and gentlemen, in order to continue this weekly program and to make it bigger and better, we are asking for suggestions and volunteers. If you give a donation, your name will be placed on our poster and all promotional materials, and you can contact Dr. Kumar Mahabir for more details. I'll introduce our moderator today, who is Shalama Mohammed, the co-director of this ICC Zoom platform, who is a business teacher and researcher from Trinidad and Tobago. She obtained her master's degree in business psychology from Franklin University in the USA. Shalama, welcome.
Thanks so much, Shakir. Assalamu alaikum, namaste, and a warm welcome to all of you. Thank you for choosing to be here with us. This program is being recorded on Zoom and live streamed on the YouTube channel of the Indo-Caribbean Cultural Center. So I want to say welcome to all of you on YouTube at this time. To avoid intrusions from trolls, our IT manager has muted everyone. Speakers, please do not admit anyone, do not unmute anyone, and do not allow anyone to share your screen. Thanks so much for cooperating. Today, we are talking about the opium poppy, Indian indentureship, and their legacies in the Indian diaspora. And why we are doing so is because India remains one of the few countries where opium is still cultivated today. The world's largest and oldest opium factory, covering an area of 45 acres, is located along the high banks of the Ganga River in Ghazipur in eastern Uttar Pradesh. Established in 1820, the Ghazipur Opium Factory played a central role in the British colonial economy. In the mid-18th century, Bihar emerged as the leading producer of the finest and largest quantities of opium in India. In 1834, British colonial authorities initiated Indian indentureship in Mauritius, followed by its extension to British Guyana in the West Indies in 1838. The vast majority of indentured servants came from Uttar Pradesh and Bihar. By 1865, Trinidad's Ordinance Number 24 had significantly increased the excise duty on opium, showcasing the economic importance of opium taxation in colonies such as British Guyana and Trinidad. This information raises several key questions. What were the uses of opium in India and the colonies? How did opium cultivation and trade impact the populations of Bihar and Uttar Pradesh? Could the opium trade have been a contributing factor to the migration of indentured laborers? What were the broader economic, social, and religious consequences of opium cultivation, use, and trade? Ladies and gentlemen, let us welcome our first speaker today, who will seek to answer some of these questions, hopefully. Dennis Ramdahin is based in the USA, but he was born in Trinidad. He's an environmentalist and sustainable development professional with 25 years of experience. He's the founder of the Bihar Foundation, which helps alleviate poverty in India's farming regions of Bihar and Uttar Pradesh. Welcome, Dennis.
Thank you so much, Salima. Thank you so much, Dr. Kumar. Sorry about that. I had some some noise coming from the kitchen. It's a pleasure to be here today on this auspicious event. 200, I think it's 239. This is your 239 session?
238.
238. Okay, great. So I was asked to talk on the subject of opium cultivation in India and under the British Raj and the effects that it has had possibly on the influence of indentureship migration during the 1800s and early 1900s. Now, I volunteered to do this presentation because of my presence on the ground in Eastern Uttar Pradesh and Bihar, working in the area of poverty alleviation, economic development, and economic restoration. So as a practitioner, I have the foresight, I have the ground experience of what we are confronting in that region, as you can possibly think about those cultural and economic practices amongst the farming sector and the poor sector, the poorest of the poor, going back decades. If we were to transition from decades going back into the British era, some of these observations might and cultural practice might still have been there. So the way I want to unfold this presentation is I will give an overview of the historical context of opium and put that in context of how the British used that as an economic driving force for revenue generation on the backs and exploitation of the people, okay, and their land resources. And then following my presentation, Mr. Tiwari, Vijay Shankar Tiwari, who is in rural India right now, in the villages of Raj. Is it? I believe it's Raj Bagahi village in Ballia district. He's one of the project directors down there, and he understands deeply the history of the British manipulation because he is an economic teacher as well as an English teacher, and he will go into greater historic details of how these things played out and how they may have contributed to the indentureship recruitments of the many peoples we see in the various British colonies. So let me start by sharing the presentation here. This here. Okay. Can everybody see that?
Yes, it's visible.
I'm going to enlarge it. Okay.
Good.
And then I'm going to try and minimize this. Put this here. Okay. So opium, poppy, Indian indentureship, and their legacies. is the name of this presentation, and it will be jointly presented by myself and Mr. Vijay Shankar Tiwari. So this is what the opium plant looks like. Okay, when we hear the about Amita Ghosh talking about sea of poppies, he's talking about vast fields of poppies. Most likely they would be pink or red in color. Okay, and they would be about 4 feet high. On the opium fields, if you were to go back in the 1800s, if you were living in Uttar Pradesh or Bihar, you would stumble upon these fields, right? And this is what it would most likely look like, sea of poppies. The poppy, when it has these fruits, is when they are usually there is an incision made, which results in the sap leaking. And the incisions are usually made during the nighttime. This is usually grown during the winter period. So as they make the incisions in the afternoon, it will overnight become hard, and then they would walk with this special tool, and they would scrape the hardened sap, if you want to call it that, and that is the solid content that carries all these various natural chemicals, right, or molecules that they will process into the various products. So once the pulp or the fruit has become ripe, it also produces these opium seeds, right? These opium seeds can be crushed and made into an oil. The oil can be used for cooking. The seeds can be used for cooking. The oil is also used in an industrial process for oil-based paint. Okay. This is something that is in the diet of the Indian society, the opium seeds, and these are the same seeds that they will germinate to recultivate the fields. So this picture shows the blossoming flower of the plant, and this is a cross-sectional picture showing what the plant looks like if it is cut in half. I mean the pulp, the fruit. So 1 second here. So the plant, I put a slide here to compare the opium plant to the cannabis plant. Most people are familiar with the cannabis plant, the marijuana plant. In the Caribbean, we call it ganja. Sometimes it's called hash, right? Even though the cannabis plant also came from India. Morphine, we associate opium with morphine, which is basically a painkiller, right? Then codeine, and this one here is I'm not sure what this is, T-bane, but we are very familiar with the word heroin, right? So these are typical narcotics. The morphine is more a painkiller, but very addictive. It's used for administering to patients who have been in accidents or going through a surgery for amputation, or even during war times. Morphine packs would be carried in the battlefields. So when we have wounded soldiers, they would administer this to control pain. So So from a level of familiarity, I think everybody should know by now the distinction between opium and cannabis. So opium as a drug business under the Raj. I mean, they said the British was the first drug lord, international drug lord, rightfully. This was their main source of income generation. Besides, you will see, I will explain here, land and salt. So it says here, Thomas Manuel book, the Opium in Company, how a global drug trade funded the British Empire, untangles the less explored side of history and explains how British colonialism was once a narco state that turned the farming lands of India into opium-producing machines. Thomas Manuel uncovered the story of a global drug trade operated and rationalized by the British Raj in India to expand its revenues. Opium became the British third highest source of income after land and salt. One second, trying to move the slide. So this is an opium map of 1893. If you look at the map carefully, right, you would see that the general area of Bihar and Uttar Pradesh was primarily designated as opium growing areas, okay? There were a few other external areas here that we're not going to really talk about, but you would see here, if we looked at why the British was growing these opiums, it was mainly because China was a big buyer, okay? So the use of opium in China, opium had long been valued in China as a medicine that could ease pain, assist sleep, and reduce stress. In early 19th century, more and more Chinese were smoking British opium as a recreational drug. By 1840, however, there were millions of addicts across the country, largely sustained by illegal British imports. The first Opium War was fought in 1839 to 1842 between China and Britain. During that war, 69 British troops were killed and 18,000 Chinese soldiers perished. So this was primarily the route that these opium trade took place, right? From interior India, which is Bihar, Uttar Pradesh, down the Gangetic River to the port of Calcutta, and then by ship to Canton, Hong Kong area. The use of opium in the British colonies. In the 19th century, opium and its derivative drugs played an important role not only as painkillers, but as treatment for diarrhea and cough. Opium was cheaper than alcohol, and the working classes saw it as an effective hangover cure. And this was quoted by Morphinomania in the 19th century National Trust of Scotland. Recreational smokers sought opium or euphoria and relaxation, while parents suited restless and teething babies with opiates lace syrups. Women sipped opium tinctures for everything from menstrual cramp to anxiety. So there was a societal use of opium, mainly for medicinal uses and also, as you see, recreational uses, believe it or not. Opium and local development. The consequences of the opium trade were the subject of intense political debate in Britain and India throughout the 19th century. In part, this debate centered on the morality of exporting a narcotic to China against the wishes of its government. However, many commentators also suggest that the trade had adverse consequences on the population in the cultivating areas. And this is why I highlighted this, because this is where it starts to affect the people of India, which primarily some of which are our ancestors. Opium growing and processing. No farmer was allowed to grow opium without a license or to sell their crop to anyone other than the opium agencies. Cultivators received an advance that would be deducted from their final payment upon delivery of the harvest. So if you read that carefully, it was like an incentive. If I'm giving you an advance, it incentivized me to sign up to grow this stuff, right? So farmers unable to meet their production quota fell into debt. The reason I highlighted this, because this is the beginning of the end of how these people became bonded servants, right? So as I repeat that, farmers unable to meet their production quota fell into debt, so the agency, which could be paid off in the form of future opium harvests. Once harvested, the raw opium was shipped to one of the two central factories, one at Ghazipur for the Banaras agency and one at Patna for the Bihar agency, where it was processed and packed into chests for export. The two opium agencies of Bihar and Banaras organized cultivation in large parts of the Gangetic Plain, as I shown in the map, in the present-day states of Uttar Pradesh, Bihar, and Jharkhand. They were divided into sub-agencies, 11 for Bihar and 16 for the Banaras agency. Outside the borders of these sub-agency cultivation were prohibited throughout British India. Cultivation was prohibited throughout British India. That means outside these areas. Each sub-agency was led by a British official who commanded a network of Indian agents known as Gumashtas. And these Gumashtas selected areas suitable for cultivation and negotiated with village headmen before issuing licenses to cultivators. Now, later on, Mr. Tiwari will explain the Zaminda system of how these head village men would have structured these things using local labor. So opium cultivation in India, the cultivation of opium in India predates the arrival of Europeans. It was thought to have been introduced by the Arabs in the 8th century. Opium was established as a lucrative cash crop in the 17th and 18th centuries as Dutch traders and later the East Indian Company brought up increasing quantities from Indian merchants in order to meet growing demands in China. After cementing its political control over Bengal, the East Indian Company was able to declare a state monopoly on the cultivation and sale of the crop in around 1772. Procurement of raw opium was initially the purview of British contractors whose abuse of their official power made them notorious in cultivating area. Now, I highlighted these two areas here because this also relates to the abuse of the labor system, okay? Farmers were often forcibly coerced into growing opium rather than traditional staple crops, a practice which exacerbated famines in times of crop failure. Remunerations was not always adequate as contractors were known to force cultivators to give up their crops for less than the cost of production. You can kind of get a sense of where this is heading. To regulate cultivation, the East Indian Company set up official government agencies in 1797. This agency system remained in place until the decline of the opium trade following the Hague International Opium Convention in 1912. So again, I put the map here to show how this thing was rolling out in India. So opium and lower socioeconomic development. At the district level, opium production was associated with lower per capita expenditure on education and healthcare. There was a reason the British was doing this, because they found that the opium fields would thrive better in areas where they had more illiteracy and more poverty, right? So sub-district level data shows that localities with a higher suitability for opium had fewer schools and a greater number of policemen stationed in their substations. There's a reason for this because of the security aspect. These analyses are constrained by the small sample size, according to the author, but the results are consistent with the focus on security at the expense of human capital and diversified economic development. So the British was more about securing their investment than investing back into the people to help the area develop. And all these are outfalls into present-day Uttar Pradesh and Bihar being called the two left-back states. Opium and lower socioeconomic development. The literature on the natural resource curse suggests that a dominant commodity that provides a large share of government revenue can undermine the incentive for public good provision. That was quoted by Ross 2003, Caselli and Cunningham 2009. In this context, securing the extraction of opium rents and policing the state monopoly power were a governmental priority, while the incentive to invest in the wider economy may have been weaker. So this one is opium as a driver for poverty in the UP Bihar rural farming landscape and correlation to indentureship recruitment. So here, I believe here is where I am going to allow Mr. Tiwari to talk more in the local context and the historic and economic context within this framework of how the hardship instilled on the people and the farmers led to bondage, right? As we've seen in the previous slide, the Britishers were more interested in securing the industry, providing security forces by ramping up police and all these, and more from a policy standpoint, taking a stronghold position in controlling the economics of that industry, and not paying attention to investing in socio-economic development of the people and the landscape. So, Mr. Tiwari, why don't you take it forward from here on these specific bullets?
Okay, Dennis. Thank you very much. And very, very enlightening so far. Let me properly introduce Mr. Tiwari to the audience, okay? And then we'll take questions for both of you at the end of his presentation. Is that okay?
Sure.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. So, ladies and gentlemen, that was Mr. Dennis Ramdahan. Very, very enlightening, as I said. And here we have now Mr. Vijay Shankar Tiwari of India. He's a specialist in British colonialism in India with a particular focus on Balia, Ara, and Chapa regions, historically known for the cultivation of lavender and opium poppies. It's very late in India right now and very, very cold. So we welcome you, Mr. Tiwari. Can you unmute your mic?
Open for a minute. Hi.
Tiwari, you have to unmute.
Yes, you're unmuted now. We should be able to hear you.
Yeah. So, first of all, let me thank everyone to give me this opportunity to speak on the 238th edition of this lecture series, Indian Indentureship opium poppy, and their legacies in the Indian diaspora. This is the topic on which I have to speak. Am I audible to everyone?
Yes, you are.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
So, my first thing that I want to express is poverty is not a God created lineage, it is man made. And the Britishers, when they arrived in India and they colonized it, they were just looking for greener pastures in terms of their in terms of increasing their revenues. And one thing that they saw was indigo, which they used in dyeing clothes, okay, in Manchester, England, for the textile industry. And it started in Champaran. That is also a very useful aspect when we are dealing with this opium and poverty, the correlationship between opium and poverty and indentureship. So it has a very synchronized aspect with indigo. I will take few minutes to give you the details about the indigo in Champaran. Actually, uh, the same thing happened with opium also, that how it was cultivated, how the zamindars were given land by the Britishers. The Britishers actually owned large tracts of land with them. They gave it to the zamindars because the zamindars were in a position to interact as agents between the sharecroppers and the Britishers because they knew English a little bit. And these zamindars, they further gave small parts of land on a long-term contract to the farmers to cultivate indigo as well as opium. One very negative aspect of cultivating these crops was that wherever these crops were cultivated, especially indigo, then further that land became unfertile for future use. Okay, supposing that one year somebody is getting 10 acres of land and he is told that you are to sign a contract for 10 years and cultivate these things. So after every 15% of the harvest that they had to grow compulsorily was indigo, or you can say opium also. And once these people, they invested their money, the peasants, and they grew the crops, then after further successive years, what happened that they were unable to sustain the growth. And as Dennis told us previously, that they were not in a position. Hello? Hello?
Yes, we're hearing you.
Go ahead.
Okay. So they were not in a position to fulfill the quota of their production. And when they were not in a position to fulfill their quotas of production, they fell into the debt trap. And private money lenders, they came into their roles. They tried and exploited everything that they could, and they were British agents, those private money lenders. Most of them were zamindars themselves. And this is how this exploitation started and led to indentureship to different parts of the colonial world of the Britishers. Furthermore, I would like to explain that the opium that is grown in and around our place, because I'm speaking from ground zero, the distance of the alkaline factory at Gazipur, which you said is in 45 acres, exactly, it is in 45 acres. There is a Kendriya Vidyalaya, a school also, and different type of research work is also being carried at that place. And my distance, where I am right now, is just about 40 kilometers from there. So I am very near to all these places, and I can tell you, or the people around the world, that what type of soil culture is there, what type of people are there. Nowadays in India, there is a change. There is a economic stability is coming into India. Poor people are also being supported by the government of the day. But previously, all these poor people were so poor that they worked very hard, they toiled very hard, they tilled the land, they produced everything. But the richness that must have percolated towards them went only to the people who exploited them, and they were the Britishers. Coming back to this poverty issue, poverty is a phenomenon which is worldwide because there are the parameters of poverty are not same in every country. America is a rich country. A person with say some amount of money, if we compare it with India, he will be in the middle class. Our poverty in India at that time was, as we have read in history, as we have learned from our forefathers, that they didn't have a proper cloth also to wear. Only one cloth they used to wear, they used to wash, and how they pulled on their life, it was a very difficult thing. I and Ramdahin, if Ramdahin remembers, we went to Kolkata, from where these people, indentured laborers, were shipped to different parts of the world like Mauritius and other places. And there we came to know that what the plight was, for how many days they used to travel in the boats and ships, and they were treated like animals. And their condition can be well understood if we go into the archive and watch that what type of it I might say it was a slavery, it was a bondage, and this bondage was the result of this opium trade. I can very definitely say that it was one of the reasons of poverty in this area of Bihar and eastern Uttar Pradesh, because the people who used to work on the field, they were neither given a support of their livelihood, rather their livelihood was taken away from them, and they were forced to be treated like cattle and herds and transported here and there. So I will say that there was a distress migration. A distress migration was taking place at that point of time. And China, let me discuss about something about China and Britishers, that why the opium was grown, why so much interest was taken by the Britishers to grow opium. Uh, Actually, the luxurious goods that were produced in China, like silk, porcelain, pottery, all these things were imported by the Britishers, and they had to pay for it in terms of gold or some metal money. So the Britishers found it easy to push into their economy this opium to correct their balance of trade payments. The balance of payment situation, they had to correct it with the Chinese, because earlier the Chinese had a favorable trade balance as compared to the Britishers. So these people, they started cultivating this opium, and opium, as we all know, their derivatives, they somehow are drugs, okay, taken by people, and they become addict of that, and that led to two wars, okay, opium war in China, which both the wars Great Britain had won. Once it was in 1839 that lasted till 1842. Another was in the year 1856, which lasted up to 1860, where the Great Britain had also an ally as France. And the result of this was that Hong Kong had to be given by the Chinese to the Britishers, and this illegal trade was carried on by the Britishers in this manner. I haven't heard in history that something which is illegal is in this way legalized. And the smugglers, they also played their role. The smuggling started, and the smuggling didn't started only of opium, but I might say that there was a smuggling of laborers also, because these agents of the Britishers who were available in these areas, they were contracting these uh, needy poor people, and they were trapping them that you will get this opportunity, you will get that opportunity, come to me, join me, okay. So they become agents of laborers, and they gave false promises, took them from these fields of opium and indigo, and most of them became indentured. And this is the story that I can relate to.
Mr. Tiwari, can you give them a real life perspective of modern day India, right? Where a landless laborer in your village, obviously, would tend to the fields. They would have children. Most likely, they would have anywhere from 5 to 10 children. And they would toil the fields. They would get like 100-day labor, physical labor, planting, weeding, harvesting. In context of the opium and indigo, if these opium fields were at risk, be it there's a drought or be it they defaulted and could not make production, what would become of these laboring class people? How vulnerable they would become to hunger and hardship that they would sort to sign up into the indentureship program?
Okay. Let me tell you like this, that suppose nowadays current situation is that the government has licensed the farmers to grow opium, okay. So if you have a shortfall of production, you have to make it up by getting that opium from anywhere, from any source, and show it as a production, even though you are not able to get up to the mark of production that has been given to you. Why? Because if you fall short of that production limit stipulated by the government, next year your license will be cancelled. So here also, the farmers, when they are falling short of their production, they are buying it or smuggling it from open market. And here, in this context, I will also like to tell you that the government is procuring this opium from the farmers at rupees 2000 a kg, and in the market, in the smuggled market, the rate is almost 60,000 rupees per kg. You can see this difference of amount. But as I say, that opium is a drug, okay? And people who are into cultivating this opium, they can have a different channel to produce some other grains, but they are stuck up in the hope that next year they might get a better revenue of their produce and their production may increase. In my village, suppose I am telling you that what is the situation here, as you told that there are 5 children or maybe 10 children, and you have been a recurrent visitor to our place, being a founder of Vihara Foundation, and you have worked so hard. I know it personally because I've been with you all the time.
Mr. Tiwari, can you elaborate when preparation for this discussion, we touched on certain subject matters. One being as the farmers would not usually be high income. They would most likely be contracted low-income people, right, to cultivate these soils. When they get into bondage, can you explain how they had to pay the British to get out of bondage, and how the Dutch capitalized on that by paying their bondage to become indentured laborers
Yes, I will tell you.
on these opium and indigo fields?
Yes, I'll tell you. Here, the most important thing to understand is that synthetic indigo was growing in Germany, which was cheaper than this organic indigo. Okay, I'm talking about indigo. So the peasants who were forced into a long-term contract and were unable to fulfill their obligations later on, they had to pay a lump sum amount to get their contracts cancelled and get a relief from the zamindars. But they were not in a situation to give that lump sum amount to the zamindars and get out of this irksome arrangement of contract, and therefore they were forced to be a part of indentured laborers.
They were bonded, but you said the Dutch came in. The Dutch
Yes.
came in and cleared their bonds and then forced them into indentureship. Can you talk a little
Yes.
bit about that?
Exactly. This is what had happened, that they were forced into indentureship because they didn't have that money to pay back. Sometimes even the cruelty rose to an extent where the family of these farmers, they had to suffer, their wives, their children, they had to suffer at the hands of the zamindar who were acting at the behest of the Britishers or the Dutch. All types of sufferings, I can say. I cannot explain it uh, because some sufferings of life can't be explained through words.
True. So then you were talking about the way that the Britishers managed lands. Initially, lands were held by the royals, right? The kings of that specific region, right? The king of Domroy, the king of Balia, the king of Patna. The lands were held by these kingdoms, but when these kingdoms succumbed to the British had all these lands that they then designated to the zamindars. And the zamindars were then the managers to distribute these lands to the landless laborers under contracts. And some of these opium and indigo contract arrangements, they failed, especially during times of drought and famine and other circumstances. And these are the hardship that would put people in contract bondage and make them vulnerable to the indentureship system. So the indentureship system would be like a way out for them to escape this.
Yes. And I will like to tell one thing, current scenario, that the government of the day nowadays, they are giving free rations to people who are the below poverty line. Okay.
The ration card, yeah.
That is how people, the laborers, are able to sustain their life. They are even getting support to make their houses. The government is funding them to make their houses. Then the Manrega scheme is there to support them during off season with work like making roads, and other government projects are there where they are working as laborers and getting minimum wages. So the condition is improving now. Slowly and slowly, the condition is improving nowadays. But yet, I may say that some percent of distress migration is there, and I hope that it will be there because the exploitation of the poor people, I don't think will end.
So can you say a little bit about the sacrifices of the indentureship people and their circumstances that led Gandhiji in Champaran to kickstart his Free India movement?
Yes, actually, when Gandhiji went to Champaran, then there were certain cases going into in the courts, and there was a place called Motihari. Gandhiji went over there, Muzaffarpur and Motihari, and he collected farmers over there, these peasants, and he told them, being a barrister, ironically, he said that going to the court will not resolve your problem. You have to unite together and fight the Britishers. And because you are having a fear of the Britishers, till you have that fear, you won't get independence. And this is how the freedom movement seed was sown by Gandhiji in this Champaran movement of Indigo.
How far is Champaran from where your village is?
That is almost 50 kilometers, 55 kilometers from my place.
And can you say a little bit more? Ara Bara Chapra, which is eastern Uttar Pradesh and western Bihar, was the stronghold of the British.
Yes,
And,
Champaran exactly, Champaran and Chapra are the same. Okay. And Ara district, I can say that Ara district is also very prominent, and Balia also, because Balia became independent even before India became independent. It was on 19th August 1942 that Balia became independent for few days.
for 90 days.
Yes. And Chitu Pandey became the leader of that movement. Then in 1857, the Sepoy Mutiny that took place in Barakpur was also led by Mangal Pandey, who belonged to Balia. And similarly, in Jagdishpur, Ara, Kunwar Singh, Raja Kunwar Singh, he fought against the Britishers. And that is why Ara is also a very prominent place uh, in terms of uh, people who joined the freedom movement, freedom fighters, I can say. These were the nurseries of freedom fighters. This area called Chapra, Ara, and Balia, it was the nursery of freedom fighters. Because where there is a suffering, leadership grows from there. Natural leadership comes out from the place where there is a suffering.
I see. Okay, so I think, Mr. Tiwari, that may have concluded your presentation. Any final remarks before I turn it back to the moderator?
Yes, my final remarks will be that I this was my first opportunity to be here on such a program, and if I have faulted somewhere, I may be forgiven for that. And the program was very informative, and such programs, I wish such programs should be carried on by you and your group. And I wish to thank Dr. Mahabir also, that he was always supporting me. Okay, because uh, as we are aware, and as Dr. Mahavir is aware, that I told them about my limitations, and still you people gave me this opportunity to speak, and you helped me a lot. So I will say that carry on with this.
Thank you.
I want to say thank you very much to Dennis and Mr. Tiwari. This has been a fantastic presentation. I could not have imagined that we would have um, the kind of details that you've been able to bring to the fore directly from the ground. This is absolutely fantastic. And I just want to share with you, so Banmati just raised in the chat that her great-grandfather came to Guyana from Ara district in 1869. Interestingly, my great grandparents, a couple with 4 children, came from Ghazipur in 1869. Interestingly, 1869 was the year in which land grants first started for the indentures in Trinidad and Tobago. So knowing that the opium factory is there in Ghazipur, knowing that you are about 40 kilometers away from there is extraordinary for me. And I must say, when you were speaking about the conditions under which the indentures were existing and would have left and so on, you made me very emotional. And I want to thank you very much for sharing all that you have. Please don't go. We want you to stay on because we have a third speaker coming. And she's going to share some very interesting information, which is related to what you and Dennis have provided. But we generally ask members of the audience to pose their questions directly to you, our speakers. I'm just going to ask everyone to kindly hold their questions until the third speaker. And let's give Mr. Tiwari a few minutes to take a rest. I know it's very late, and I hope you're going to stay with us a little bit longer. Is that okay?
It's my pleasure, ma'am. It's my pleasure.
Wonderful.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, ma'am.
So we're going to mute you now, and I'll just bring on our next speaker. Thank you.
Okay, ma'am.
So ladies and gentlemen, our third speaker is 1 minute, please. Get my information in order. So our third speaker is Dr. Aliyah Shahinur Amin. She's in Canada right now, but she's originally from Bangladesh. She completed her doctoral studies in 2024 at Dhaka University in Bangladesh. The title of her thesis is An Eco-Critical Reading of Amitav Ghosh's Fiction, which includes his novel, Sea of Poppies. Welcome, Dr. Aliyah.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Shalima Mohammed. I'm truly grateful to all of you for inviting me to this wonderful session. It's I was really spellbound listening to all this lively discussion. And hello, everyone. I feel truly honored to attend the 238 ICC and AGI Weekly Sunday Thought Leaders Public Forum and speak on opium poppy, Indian indentureship, and their legacies in the Indian diaspora. So let me share my slides so that you can understand what I'm actually trying to speak on.
We can see your slides.
Yes, let me go
Full
to my
screen.
first slide. Yes.
Sure.
Okay. All right. So, in fact, this is my part of my doctoral thesis, and that's why I was really awestruck listening to all this discussion. And it's really an interesting topic. So, what author I worked on, as I have already, as you have already heard, that it is Amitav Ghosh, an acclaimed Indian writer in English. Ghosh has wonderfully fictionalized these untold historical events through his fiction and nonfiction. I mention untold because uh, during our student life, we heard about indigo cultivation, but not much about opium. So opium has become a very interesting topic for me to work on during my doctoral research work. And to me, that Ghosh has unveiled this wonderful side of historical events. I think we should know about it. And from today's discussion, I have learned more about it. So, in fact, Ghosh has chiefly highlighted the cultivation, trading, and smuggling of opium, Indian indentureship, and the Opium War in his fiction, popularly known as Ibis Trilogy. So, Ibis Trilogy consists of the three novels, namely Sea of Poppies, River of Smoke, and Flood of Fire. Of these three novels, Ghosh focuses on the production of opium and indentureship in his novel, Sea of Poppies. So before we move on, I should discuss a little bit about the poppy plant, the subsequent production of opium, indentured worker, and the Indian diaspora. We have already heard from our previous two speakers, and they have, extensively discussed about it. But still, to move on to my discussion, I think I should touch a little bit about it. So, poppy plant and opium. Opium is a potent narcotic whose derivatives include morphine, codeine, heroin, and oxycodone. It's produced by the poppy plant, Papaver somniferum. Opium, its derivatives, and their semi-synthetic alternatives are all considered narcotics. Narcotics are used therapeutically to induce anesthesia, relieve diarrhea, suppress cough, and treat pain. They're among the most addictive drugs that people are aware of. So, ancient Greek and Roman physicians used to use opium as a powerful pain reliever. So it has a very, very good effect if we actually take it as a kind of medicine in that way. It was also prescribed to induce sleep and to give relief to the bowels. Opium was even thought to protect the user from being poisoned. It was considered having pleasurable effects as well. Apart from being used for drug manufacturing, poppy seeds are used as food like poppy seed bagels, lemon poppy seed cakes, etc. In Bangla, it is known as posto, which is used to prepare several curries. And I usually love this poppy or posto for preparing my curries. Amitav Ghosh, in his novel Sea of Poppies, illustrates an untold narrative of the miseries of the indentured laborers under the rule of British colonial power. And according to Merriam-Webster thesaurus, indenture is a contract binding one person to work for another for a given period of time. Indentured labor from South Asia, 1834 to 1917, shows indentured labor was a system of bonded labor that was instituted following the abolition of slavery. Indentured laborers were recruited to work on sugar, cotton, and tea plantation and rail construction projects in British colonies in West Indies, Africa, and Southeast Asia. It is to be noted here that slavery was abolished in British colonies in 1833 under the Slavery Abolition Act. This act largely aimed at dismantling the plantation slavery existed in the British tropical colonies, where the plantation slaves were larger in number than the colonist. So, for the fear of mass uprising of the enslaved population, led the colonist to go for the abolishment of slavery. In Sea of Poppies, Amitav Ghosh narrates the rise of the endangered workforce in the wake of growing trade and commerce relationship of the colonial power with the outside world at the end of slavery. In fact, the trade relationship reached a momentum with the introduction of indentured labor. The locals are convinced or forced to sign up for indentured work with the assurance that they would be able to lead a free life in a new land with hopes and promises. Indentured laborers were popularly known as girmithia, which is originally derived from the word girmith, a distorted form of the English word agreement. Malhotra observes in the 37 years spanning 1879 to 1916, nearly 60,500 laborers from various religions and castes would be transported to Fiji Islands on 42 ships, making nearly 87 trips. These migrants were themselves a part of more than 1 million Indians who traveled to the colonies in the Indian and Atlantic Oceans. The colony, which came under the control of British Raj, was badly in need of laborers who can multiply the economic development. Hifadhus said, acquired by the British Crown in 1874, the colony of Fiji was expected to show economic development and growth, but neither capital nor labor was readily available. Sir Arthur Gordon, the first substantive governor of the island, invited the Colonial Sugar Refining Company of Australia to extend its operations to Fiji. For the workforce, he turned to India, which already supplied indentured labor to other British colonies. It's taken from Malhotra. The indentured laborers were also derogatively known as coolie, as I mentioned before, who signed a contract in their own country to work abroad for a period of 5 years. They were committed to give wages, a small piece of land, and a return passage once the contract is over. In many cases, the migrants could not come and their wages were very poor. They had to live in a very harsh conditions. Many workers tried to escape from this inhuman living condition, but failing to do so, they were imprisoned and their length of service was doubled to 10 years by breaching the contract. In Sea of Poppies, the planter, Monsieur de Epinay, wrote a letter to Mr. Reid, said, "My canes are rotting in the field, Mr. Reid. Tell Mr. Burnham that I need men. Now that we may no longer have slaves in Mauritius, I must have coolies or I am doomed." Ghosh, page 22. Now, diaspora. According to Merriam-Webster, diaspora is the places where people settle and establish communities away from their ancestral homeland. So the culture and tradition of the ancestral homeland have a great influence among the people of the diaspora. Similarly, the indentured workforce who scattered to different parts of the world due to their livelihood developed a community where they practice the culture and tradition on their ancestral homeland to remain morally and spiritually connected. Richard B. Allen, in the Abstract of Indian Ocean Indentured Labor, 19th and early 20th century, he said the 19th and the early 20th centuries witnessed the migration of more than 3 million men, women, and children from Eastern Africa, East Asia, and South Asia throughout the Indian Ocean to satisfy the demand for free non-slave workers in French and especially British colonies in this part of the world. The origins of these free migrant labor trades to the Mascarenes Islands, Mauritius, Reunion, Ceylon or Sri Lanka, Malaya, and East and South Africa between the mid-1820s and late 1930s may be traced to various developments. The dramatic expansion of slave trading in the Indian Ocean during the late 18th and early 19th centuries to satisfy the demand for labor in European colonies. The abolition of the British and French slave trades in 1807 and 1818, respectively, and then of slavery in these colonial empires in 1834 and 1848, respectively. The transportation of Indian and Ceylonese convicts to British settlements and possessions beginning in the late 18th century and the development of colonial plantation economies during the 19th century to produce tropical commodities for export to imperial and global markets. The legacy of these labor trades continues to influence social, economic, cultural, and political life in the former British colonies that acquired independence during the late 1940s, 1950s, and 1960s. Sea of Poppies by Amitav Ghosh is well researched in that way and very thought-provoking novel that goes deep into the complex history of this opium trade in the 19th century India and China. Every action in this novel centers around the opium trade. Ghosh beautifully illustrates the complex economic, social, and political factors that led to the spread of opium addiction in India and China. He demonstrates how the opium trade was intertwined with the British colonial enterprise and the larger global economy of the time. The novel also projects the devastating impact of the opium trade on the lives of the people in India and China. The major characters of this novel are Diti, Hukum Singh, Chandan Singh, Kalua, Jackery Reid, Benjamin Burnham, and Paulette. Diti is the main protagonist. She's a young woman of an upper caste who lives in a village about 400 miles from the sea. She is married to Hukum Singh, an opium addict who was wounded in battle. She has a daughter named Kabutari, who was actually fathered by her brother-in-law, Chandan Singh. When Hukum Singh dies, she decides to commit sati on his funeral pyre rather than marry Chandan. She is rescued by Kalua, an untouchable whom she once saved. Together with Kalua, she leaves her village for Calcutta. She boards the ibis along with Kalua to become an indentured laborer in Mauritius. Hukum Singh is the husband of Diti. He's a cripple who was wounded in battle. He's an opium addict working in the Gazipur opium factory. When Hukum dies, Diti plans to commit sati, as I mentioned, in his funeral pyre to avoid marriage with Chandan. Chandan Singh is the brother of Hukum Singh. He raped Diti along with his mother as an accomplice on the day of her marriage to Hukum. He is the father of Kabutari, Diti's daughter. Kalua, as I mentioned before, is an untouchable. He takes Hukum to the factory in his cart each day, and he is one who brings back Hukum's body when he dies. He's a strong wrestler. He's rescued by Diti from humiliation by some high caste Thakurs. In turn, he saves her from the funeral pyre of her husband. Together with Diti, he leaves for Calcutta and then board the ibis to go to Mauritius. Jackery Reid is the son of a white father and a quadroon mother. He joins the ibis as the ship's carpenter to escape racism. He soon rises to the post of a captain when all the original crew die. With the help of Serang Ali and other Laskars, he is given the post of the second mate in the second voyage of the ibis. Raja Neel Ratan Haldar. He is an Indian Raja whose family has been ruling the province of Rashkali for generations. His father was a lavish man, and that along with the losses incurred in the opium trade with China leaves him huge debts. He approaches Burnham to sell off his properties to settle his debts, but Burnham asks for the Rashkali province to settle all his debts. When Neel Ratan refuses, Burnham and his friends have him tried in court for forgery and is sentenced for 7 years in Mauritius. Benjamin Burnham is an unscrupulous trader and an evangelist who buys the ibis, causing the fateful first journey of the ibis from Baltimore to Calcutta, after which the ship is refitted. He and his wife raise Paulette when she is orphaned. When Neel Haldar approaches him to sell his properties, he asks for his jamindari. When Haldar refuses, he falsely accuses him of forgery. Paulette is a French orphan who grew up in India with her ayah or nurse and her ayah's son Jodu. Her mother had passed away in childbirth and her father had been a political radical. She is taken in by the Burnhams, who try to teach her the English ways, but she feels more at home with Indian lifestyle and clothes. On being pressured by Burnham to marry Justice Kendall Bosch, she flees and boards the IB in disguise as a niece of one of Burnham's employees. The social, environmental, and economic impacts of colonial rule on the place and people of the colonies are beyond imagination. The colonies became the base of their capitalist hegemony. The age-old crops that satisfy the needs of the teeming millions were subverted all on a sudden to give way to the production of new cash crops like sugar, opium, indigo, tea, to boost the British coffer. The economic and social cost of the production and distribution and transshipment of these crops destroyed the traditional living standard. Diti muses over her childhood memories. She is ruminating over this. Poppies had been a luxury then, grown in small clusters between the fields that bore the main winter crops, wheat, mosur dal, and vegetables. Her mother would send some of her poppy seeds to the tall press, and the rest she would keep for the house, some for replanting, and some cook with meat and vegetables. As for sap, it was sieved of impurity and left to dry until the sun turned it into hard Akbari Afim. Ghosh, page 29. It's from Sea of Poppies. Out of her nostalgia, Diti also thinks that in the old days, farmers would keep a little bit of their homemade opium for their families to be used during illness or at harvest and weddings. The rest they would sell to the local nobility or to paikari merchants from Patna. Back then, a few clumps of poppy were enough to provide for a household's needs, leaving a little over to be sold. Ghosh, page 29. The cultivation of poppy was not an easy task. Peasants were not interested to grow poppy because they had to pay a lot for cultivating the crop. So no one was inclined to plant more because of all the work it took to grow poppies. 15 plowings of the land and every remaining plot to be broken by hand with a datoli, fences and barns to be built, purchases of manure and constant watering, and after all that, the frenzy of the harvest, each bulb having to be individually nicked, drained, and scraped. It's also from Ghosh, page 29. So the cultivation and production of poppy was insane to the farmers. Such punishment was unbearable when you had a patch or two of poppies, but what sane person would want to multiply these labors when there were better, more useful crops to grow, like wheat, dal, vegetables? Ghosh, page 29. So the production of winter crops was steadily dwindling because of the growing requirement of the opium by the British traders to be transported to China. Come the cold weather, the English sahibs would allow little else to be planted. Their agents would go from home to home, forcing cash advances on the farmers, making them sign Assami contracts. It was impossible to say no to them. If you refused, they would leave their silver hidden in your house or throw it through a window. It was no use telling the white magistrate that you had not accepted the money and your thumbprint was forged. He earned commissions on the opium and would never let you off. And at the end of it, your earnings would come to no more than 3.5 sikka rupees, just about enough to pay off your advance. Ghosh, page 30. The middlemen became the local recruiters of the migrant workers. The fate of the workers largely depended upon these local employers. The growth of British trade and economy got a steady pace because of the contribution of the middleman. The transformation of India into a source of cheap labor for the British Empire and the increasing involvement of the overseas capitalists in recruitment for plantation economies resulted in competition both among colonial recruiters and between them and local employers. The sourcing of recruiters from within the ranks of migrants became crucial to the effectiveness of labor mobilization, but in the process, the increasing autonomy of these agents subtly altered the balance of power between laborer and employer, with far-reaching consequences for the plantation societies, to which they resorted in large numbers. So it's from Bates and Marina. In Origins of Girmithia, Brijvelal observed that origin of most of the endangered workers is from North India and especially from Bihar, where migration was nothing new since pre-modern period. As a result, the migration offer by the colonial government seemed to them quite lucrative. According to Lal, these immigrants signed a contract with the promise that they would be provided with a congenial working environment, higher wages, better living standard, and optional free return passage to India. As a result, the indentured workers accepted the offer voluntarily with the expectation of better life far afield. Social scientists, especially anthropologists, have pointed out the positive and negative sides of this migration. According to them, this venture was a promise to a life of opportunities which would release them from the oppression of caste, class, and social degradation. However, there are counter arguments against this claim. According to these scholars, this indentured system entails unfairness, injustice, and slavery by mentioning that while indenture is a temporary settlement, slavery is a permanent institution. But both had to go through physical and mental sufferings. Professor Tinker also mentioned the trickery adopted by the recruiters in recruiting the migrant workers. The journey of the indentured laborers was inhuman. Diti and her fellow migrant workers discovered a new environment on board the Ibis, which can only be compared with prison. The migrant workers were accommodated in the hold, which ran the length of the vessel and had no compartments or internal divisions. It was like a floating storage shed with a ceiling so low that a grown man could not stand upright in it for fear of hurting his head. The hold's windows, of which there were several, were usually kept shut for fear of thieves, thugs, and river dacoits. After the rains came down, they were almost permanently sealed so that very little light penetrated inside, even when the clouds cleared. Ghosh, page 231. Diti had a feeling that she was jumping into a well where there was abysmal darkness. However, when a little light allowed her to see the condition of that compartment, she was awestruck to see an unimaginable number of people in a small space. There was a stark discrimination of the compartments between the local migrant workers and their superior commanders. The migrant workers got little space to stay, which was unbreathable, while their supervisors were blessed with all the comforts and luxuries. With no flame lit and the hatch secured, such light as there was came from cracks in the timber and the opening of peace days. The leaden gloom combined with the midday heat and the fetid stench of hundreds of enclosed bodies gave the unstirred air a weight like that of sewage. It took an effort even to draw breath. Ghosh, page 317. Such was the condition of the space allotted for the accommodation of the seamen. A little space to get settled inside the mere hollow space of the ship was a dream for the migrant workers. No sooner had the overseers departed, shutting the hatch behind them, than the migrants began to disrupt the careful circle of their mats, scuffling and shouting as they fought for space. The female folks were engulfed by an unprecedented fear. Ghosh wrote in page 370, as the noise of the tugboat mounted, Munia, began to tremble, and Paulette, guessing that she was on the verge of hysteria, drew her closer. So many migrants in a small place who never experienced seafaring before found themselves in an unimaginable situation. The schooner lurched to its Jamna side, and down in the darkness of Dabusa, people slipped and slid and tumbled upon each other like crumbs on a tilted tray. Ghosh, page 371. The situation gets worse when riot breaks out among the migrants. Dozens of terrified migrants hurling themselves at the ladder, pounding on the fastened hatch in a belated attempt at escape. They were imploring to let them free, but all in vain. Their appeal was heard by none of the officers nor their loyal forces. Getting annoyed, Neil silenced them, saying, "Be quiet, you fools. There is no escape, no turning back." Two different types of meal plans were allotted for two categories of passengers of the IBs: officers and endangered migrants. The officers were served with roast lamb, meat sauce, and boiled potatoes, while the migrant seamen had rice, dal, and lime pickle. In Sea of Poppies, Ghosh revived the old trading diasporas of the Indian Ocean as part of the transoceanic trading system to show the large-scale movement of endangered labor from South Asia to other colonial outposts. Ghosh maintains the perfect alignment with history by fictionalizing the miseries of the migrant workers. The racial discrimination they faced is no less than the suffering of slaves. They were uprooted from their rooted home only to face the trauma of identity crisis. So that is the end of my discussion. Thank you all, and thanks to the organizer for giving me an opportunity to speak on this opium and the endangered workers. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Alia. I think what you've succeeded in doing is you've given quite a history of indentureship that few really reflected on in the past. And I know that it's coming directly from Sea of Poppies, but I think it was quite an accurate view of what our foreparents would have had to go through. I want to thank you very much for doing that. Ladies and gentlemen, we want to open up the floor now to your questions. So I invite you to please indicate that you'd like to ask a question directly to our speakers. Kindly raise your electronic hands, which you will find in the reactions button at the base of your screen, and you'll be called upon. Meanwhile, I'm seeing some questions in the chat, and I'll put it out there for any of our three speakers. So Weaving is asking, first of all, she wants to thank you very much for the informative session. And she's asking, firstly, when opium was first introduced to India by the Arabs, what were they used for? And to whom did the Indian farmers sell the opium? Can we have a response perhaps from Mr. Tiwari? Can you unmute your mic? You're still muted. Yeah, you're muted now. Go ahead, please.
Actually, opium, its origin is from Mesopotamia. And when it came from Arab countries like Afghanistan, you might say, that was in 1700s, in the year 1700. And moreover, the farmers didn't sell the opium. They were forced to cultivate it. So we cannot say that they were in a position to sell it, because they had no say except that they were to be working as laborers? This is the answer to this question.
Okay, very good. Thank you. So let me just ask you the second question. You please elucidate a bit more on what specific coercive measures British used to deprive Indian farmers of possession of their own land and force them to grow opium.
Mr. Tiwari, can you explain the Zamindar system, how the lands transitioned from royal holdings to British holdings, and then how it was parceled down to cultivators under contract?
Yes. As I learned, okay, that before the Britishers, the land were in the hands of the Mughals, and this opium has also been part of the Mughals in Akbari, okay, during Akbar's period in 1500, 1600, year 1500, 1600, during Akbar's regime, this opium was being traded, and the land ownership, since it was with the Mughals, then it passed into the hands of the Britishers. And when the Britishers left, okay, then there were some pockets of influence where the kings were having their say. And that passed on to the zamindars, and finally it came back to the peasants in a small form. And the documents, I have certain documents regarding this transition of land from one part to another part. Okay. But the language in which those papers are written is in Kaithi language, Kaithi, Kaithi language. Okay. So the land ownership, actually, Zamindari was not there during the Vedic times. India is a very ancient country, and from Vedic period, you will never come to know that there was anything like Zamindari system. Okay, people used to stay at a place and they do their cultivations for their self sustenance, for their self use. That is how things were being managed. Later on, to get revenue out of these things, the Mughals, they also developed a system that you become a zamindar, we are giving this much of land, and you have to collect a rent and pay it back to us. They also imposed jizya tax and things like that. Later on, the Britishers also, they became the owners of large tract of lands, which they passed on to the zamindars and made them their agents to collect rent and forcefully let farmers cultivate the cash crops, which was in their benefit.
All right, thank you very much for that. I think your presentations, Mr. Ramdahan, Mr. Tiwari, and Dr. Alia, your presentations were so fantastic. Very few people have questions. You've covered so many areas that we hadn't even thought about. What I would like to find out from you, though, is based on the fact that you, Mr. Tiwari, are living in Ghazipur, you're
Bali,
Balia,
yes.
right?
Earlier it was Ghazipur. Balia is carved out of Ghazipur.
Okay, thank you for that. Can you please tell us about heroin addiction in that area?
Heroin addiction is in Punjab, though it is grown here in these areas. In Madhya Pradesh also, there is a factory like Ghazipur. It is in Nemuch, 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 Madhya Pradesh. There also we have a factory, and these two factories are Asia's biggest factory. But in my locality, in Balia and Ghazipur, the addiction problem is not there. People, they take wine from the pouch, okay? It's spurious liquor, you might say. Spurious liquor. Okay. They are in the habit of drinking spurious liquor, but this addiction of opium is not here. It is prevalent in Punjab mostly. Punjab is suffering nowadays.
Why do you think there are so few users of heroin in that area?
Uh, I think that spurious liquor is cheaper than heroin. That
Okay.
can be one.
I never use heroin, but I believe you need a needle, right, to administer it?
Yes, yes. You need a needle also to
So
administer.
maybe use
In Bollywood, okay, in Bombay, smack, heroin, all these drugs, they are very popular over there. I think that rich people, okay, are more fancied towards these drugs
Right.
rather than the other one.
Mm-hmm. MK, you had your hand up earlier. Do you have a question?
No. I think most of the questions have been answered. I just have a very brief observation to say that this wonderful background is so lacking in our understanding of the indentured system. And I'm grateful that we've been able to have these wonderful presentations that I heard today, that anyway has enriched my own understanding. And also, not only that, I've learned one more thing about Gandhi, that beside putting an end to the indentured very practically, Gandhi was also involved in Champaran and the Indigo case. Again, shows what a great social reformer he was in those early days. That's all I wish to say. I think it's very enriching. Thank you to all of you who presented so brilliantly.
Thank you very much, MK.
April,
Mr.
let's say,
Michael Mitchell. Mr.
allow-
Michael Mitchell made a comment in the chat, and we would really appreciate it if we can raise this for the audience, especially those who are on YouTube at this time.
I just pointed out that what changed in the 19th century, I'm reading my own comment now, was that the British were importing much more from China. For example, tea, ceramics, and various other products. But the Chinese didn't want any British produce. The only real demand in China was for opium. So this became the way to avoid a huge trade imbalance. There were, silver and gold were pouring into China, and the British were trying to avoid that. So they encouraged the opium trade. And we've heard a lot of what consequences that had. I think Ghosh's novel is great for raising awareness of this because people just didn't know very much about it. But we mustn't forget that what Ghosh was writing was a novel and not entirely to be taken as history. Although it's based on a lot of historical facts, that's true. And the voyage of the Ibis differs from the voyages of the later Indentureship travel towards the Caribbean, for example. The Ibis is just going to Mauritius, and things changed a little later. However, it's still a great novel and a very wonderful read. So certainly I'd encourage anyone who hasn't read Sea of Poppies to try it. But don't forget, it's not history.
Yeah, and thank you for that reminder. Mr. Tiwari, would you like to comment? Have you read Sea of Poppies?
I haven't read Sea of Poppies, but I have read about Amitav Ghosh. There is a chapter in class 12 English. The name of the chapter is, I might say, the story is about a patient of cancer and how he is in contact with Amitav Ghosh and the nostalgic moments are being shared over there.
Okay, excellent. Thank you very much. Dr. Shadanand, your hand is up. Please go ahead with your question.
Hello, hello, everyone. It's marvelous. This is the class. Like all the three presenters, great. Ati Sundar. I have a question. At first, Dennis G, how are you, my friend? We were in
Yes,
Lucknow
sir. Yes, thank
University
you.
and we have passed there, a resolution. What was that? You have read that? Do you know?
I didn't hear your question, sir.
Yes, to you. Because thereafter, I have another question. We have passed there a resolution, and then that labor was a crime against the humanity in Lucknow University. Okay, all to you three, if you listen the story what you all are talking, mostly the lady, the last presenter, then you can see the British were cruel. Churchill is one of the men we don't earn to adore him. Most bad thing what happened is 1,000 to 1,060 Bharatis were killed because some of them they refused to work on the opium plantation. The grandfather of my Aji, Laji Singh, I think he came from Balia or something like that, and he was a friend of Pandeyji. So they asked him to fight to shoot the Bharati Bai, and he didn't do that, so he left away, go to British Guyana. Thanks for him, I'm here. But do you know that, what I'm telling you? 1 million to 160 million Bharatis are killed. What about that? Can you tell me that? And what are you going to do about this? Being silent, chup rehna, isse kya hoga? Thank you. All to you.
Yes, I do remember you guys petitioned to make that case for crime against humanity. I do remember that in Lucknow now.
Thank you. But my question, 100 million of our Bhartis has been killed, genocide in the British Raj. What about that? Are you doing something? Because I know I have a lawyer in New Delhi, High Court lawyer, and I sent it here, a paper to fight this in the High Court, but the law is cancelled. The law for this process is not being exist because the Parliament of India has cancelled the law. And still the ancestors of these people are suffering. And besides of that, the Bhartis, diaspora, and colonists, Dennis, do you know that? And still we are keeping our mouth. Why is, the slavery and the indentureship are two sides of the same coin. Because in both cases, we have seen there was human traffic, transatlantic human traffic, and it was crime against the humanity. They have done. There are a lot of examples we have. And still the Bharat ones are doing anything. Oh
Yeah.
my God.
Dr. Shadanand, I can hear in your voice
Yes.
how this has impacted you, and I agree it is a conversation that we must have. Perhaps we can do so on another day, if that's okay with
It's
you.
okay. But
Yeah.
that is my point. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm glad that you raised it though. Thank you very
Okay.
much.
We see you all are quiet about this. Thank you.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you so much. Rihanna, your hand is up. Do you have a question?
Yeah, I had. Hello, Shalima. Hello, everyone. It's an excellent program because it gives us more. There's a lot of information I just didn't know about, and someone just pointed something. He said that it's not. It's just a book and the Sea of Poppies. But for me, it's so much because a lot of people don't read those thick history books. They have to put on the glasses now, and the letters are so small. So if there is a roman of if there is a book that reads well and it's a story, I think for someone who wrote that story, they put their effort in it. They took time and to tell us something about their history, and it's so much information. So I really want to say that I'm very glad. I'm really very glad that you did the program and you shared this today with all of us. All of us. Thank you very much, Shalima. Thank you very much, Dr. Kumar. Thank you.
You're
Thank
very
you.
much. You're very welcome, Rihanna. And I want Dr. Aliyah, please, if you could just share with us, when you were doing your research, to what extent did you find information that was factual in the Sea of Poppies? Is that something that you analyzed at all?
In fact, Amitav Ghosh wrote his novels based on the historical facts. So he fictionalized the historical events. So I don't think that there are, for the sake of fiction, there are some kind of like characters and events, but the facts remain facts. There is no distortion. I think so. And what Amitav Ghosh tries to show that is the beginning of climate crisis. The climate crisis we are facing today, it started from those time. And because of capitalism, profit making, so all these issues actually started from from the colonial period. And these are actually the starting point.
All right, excellent. Thank you very much for sharing that. Ladies and gentlemen, I
Thank
want
you
to
very
say
much.
thank you so much to our three speakers today, Mr. Dennis Ramdahin from Trinidad, Mr. Vijay Tiwari from India, and Dr. Aliyah Shahnur Amin, who's originally Bangladeshi, now in Canada. You all have given us fantastic information, absolutely fascinating, and I want to thank you very much for being here with us today. To members of the audience, thank you as well. It was a pleasure being in your company, and we hope to have discussions like this in the future. So let me turn you all over now to Shakira.
Thank you, Shalima. And we want to thank every person here for taking the time to attend and to participate. As we've said earlier, this public meeting is being hosted by the Indo-Caribbean Cultural Center. And like today, we often partner with the Amina Ghafoor Institute for the Study of Indentureship and its Legacies, led by Professor David Davidine. And you can feel free to contact the IECC to publish your books. Remember that we are asking for you to kindly give us your suggestions. If you give a donation, your name will be placed on our poster and all promotional materials, and you can contact Dr. Mahabir for details. Our topic next Sunday will be the impact of Christian churches on the Indian diaspora. So we look forward to that. We want to thank our advisory and planning team led by Dr. Kumar Mahabir, our IT consultants Daryl Grantham and Navin Mangal, who has been advising on recording the program, which will be uploaded to our website and YouTube permanently for posterity. Thanks again to Daryl for designing the poster and Ravin Ram Singh for the social media marketing, and Miriam Mohammed for producing our TikTok videos. So please visit, like, and subscribe to our YouTube channel to see all our past recordings. I am Shakira Mohammed from Trinidad and Tobago saying goodbye. May God bless you all. Dhanyavad.
Thank you, everyone, for